Hi and welcome back. You may or may not have seen my previous tutorial on how to bend layers in 3D, but today we're going to go one step further and creating a magazine style page turn animation. I already have all my pages set up. I've just created some very simple pages just for the sake of this tutorial, so they're pretty basic. I have a front page, page 1, page 2, all the way down to page 8 and a back page. If you want to keep yours the same as mine, my sizes are 1080 by 1440, so that's the size of each page. And then in the main composition, 3840 by 2160. And all we're going to do to start with is to drag our front page into our main composition. This page will be the base for all our pages, so we will animate this one page turn and then use it for all the others. So spend a bit more time on this first page, and then we can duplicate and use the same keyframes and animation for all the others. With our layer selected or our page selected, we're going to press Y and just move our anchor point over to the left. If you hold Shift, it should also just snap onto the edge. If not, make sure you have Snap In selected up here. And with the anchor point on the left, we're then going to press P, and we're just going to move our layer back to the middle, which I know should be 1920, which is half the width of our composition. And now we can make the page 3D, and then over here where it says Classic 3D, we will change this to Cinema 4D. And this will allow us to create the bend we're looking for during the page turn itself. Now we want to go to our page and its properties. Let's just drag this to the beginning of our composition, so we're at 0. And let's put a keyframe on, I think it's the Y rotation, yeah. So I'm just going to put a keyframe on Y. And then I'm going to go forward in our timeline to roughly 2 seconds. And then I'm just going to drag this up so it goes 180 degrees, or I could type in 180. And here we have the main movement of our page. As you can see, it's very rigid. So unless you want your magazine to look like it's made of card or some sort of really hard material, then what we want to do is add a bend, sort of a natural movement to what paper would do. And to do that, we're going to go down to geometry options. If this is grayed out, you may have forgotten the step to change Classic 3D to Cinema 4D, so make sure that is selected. Go back to our geometry options. I'm going to go back to our first keyframe and just make a keyframe, leaving the percent at 0, so we're not going to touch that yet. Go to our last keyframe, and again, leaving it at 0, just going to add another keyframe. So nothing has changed here at all, except we have the keyframe at the start and end on 0. And then in the middle, at 1 second, as ours is a 2-second turn, this is where we want to add some curvature. And I'm going to bring this down to -80. And then let's up our segments so that it's not as jagged as you can see here. So the more segments, the smoother our bend will look. So let's up this to 20. See how that looks? Yeah, that's not too bad. So you want this number as little as possible without compromising the shape of the curve. Let's just play this through now. And there we go. Already that's looking much better than that rigid piece of cardboard we had to start with. So let's move on and highlight the first 2 keyframes. Right click and let's just do an easy ease out. Highlight the final 2 keyframes and easy ease in. Let's see how this looks. Okay, I think with just that basic easing, it's not looking too bad at all. What we can do is just on the rotation, I would suggest leaving the curve as it is, but with the Y rotation, we can always just highlight that second keyframe, go to our curve editor. We can just have it sort of slightly slower at the very end, as if it's just being slowed down by the air, as a page would. But I wouldn't go too crazy with it. Let's just see how this is. Yep, I think I wouldn't really go too much more than that, but I think that's looking good to me. So let's move on and add some more pages. So what we're going to do, let's collapse that. is just simply duplicate our front page. Therefore, we have all the keyframes. It's going to move in the exact same way. And what we're going to do is on the one beneath, we're going to hold Alt or Option and drag on our page 1 on top. And let go. You won't see anything change because that's underneath this layer. So if you go to the end of our keyframes where the page turn has completed, you won't see anything either. And that is because, and if I turn off this top layer, there it is, they're on top of each other. They're sort of intersecting and they are one, let's say. So all we need to do here to fix this is just adjust the position slightly. So let's press P on our page 1, on our second page. Let's, before we change this, let's press U on our keyboard to bring up our keyframes. And let's just go to the middle where we can sort of see, the front and back pages at the same time. So roughly here, so we can see our first page on our inside page. Then let's press P, and let's just adjust this first number, our X position, up 1 pixel. So rather than 1920, let's go to 1921, and voila, there it is. So that's what we wanted. So let's just play this. There is one more thing which I know is going to go wrong. So let's just play this, and we can attack that head on in a second. And yep, exactly what I thought was going to happen has happened, because it happened to be last time, funnily enough. And that is the intersection of the two pages just as they're coming into their final resting place. So the best thing around this I found was we could cut our top layer off so it then disappears after we no longer see it. Or because we're going to be duplicating these layers, and rather than keep adjusting this, it's easier in the long run I found to add some opacity keyframes. So let's go to the start, add a keyframe with it at 100. Let's right click and do toggle hold keyframe just so it doesn't change. And then let's move on frame by frame until we can no longer see that first page, which is here. We can't see it anymore. So now let's add another keyframe, this time at 0. And it now should, when we get to the end, be invisible. And there we go. So something else that's happened, and it only happens to me every now and then. It never happens all the time, and I can't figure out why. So it's actually probably a good thing it's happening now in case this happens to you. And for some reason, when we get to this last keyframe, our page disappears, and we can go 1 frame back and it's there, but it just suddenly disappears when we hit that final keyframe. I can't ever work it out. So if you do know what this issue is, please let me know in the comments. But my way around this is to just add a 0.01 on the end of our Y rotation on that final keyframe. And for some reason, just that tiny bit extra seems to fix the issue. I think it's because it's perfectly flat, and I don't know why, so please let me know if you do, and it'd be great to know this in the future. But for now, let's leave this as it is. The next thing you would have noticed is our page 1 is reversed backwards. And that's because it's the back, we're actually seeing the back of it. So what we need to do is go to our page 1. And this is going to be the same for every odd page. So let's add an adjustment layer, call it flip. And then in our effects, let's search for transform, untick uniform scale, and then just do on the width -100, just so it flips the page in our pre-comp. So when we go back to our main composition, it is the correct way around. What we can do now is, because it's an adjustment layer, we can copy this through all our odd number pages and just paste this into the top of the composition. Okay, so we have our first 2 pages. So the best thing to do now is to change the color of these 2 pages. I always find it's best to color code them in pairs, just so you know which pairs do what, and otherwise you end up with a whole composition of the same color and you don't know what's doing what. Essentially, you don't know what page is what. So let's make these yellow. Let's duplicate these 2 layers and bring them to the bottom. Highlight the first one, and let's bring in our page 2, the third of our pages, and then alt replace, and then alt replace our page 3 as well. There we go. As you'll see, they are on top of the others, but we can move this in a second. But firstly, before I forget, I'm just going to highlight both of these and make these any other color. Let's go with a purple maybe. And on these two pages, let's press U with them both selected. And rather than just drag 2 pages here, which will work, as you'll see, there are now 2 pairs of pages, but we want to see them while that first page turn is still happening. We want to see it underneath here in wherever we can see it, we want to be able to see it. So let's bring them back to the front. And rather than bring the whole layer across, let's just highlight all the keyframes and then move the keyframes across. So whenever we want that second page to start turning, that's where we can have our first keyframe. Let's wait. Let's put ours on 1 second. See how this looks. So I have noticed that our page 1 is intersecting with our page 3, and that is down to our curves that we did earlier. So the best thing to do is to remove the curves on the Y rotation. Just adjust it until we can remove that intersection, just until we can't see that left edge of our page 1, which is about here. So, okay, that's all good. So it's a matter of just checking this now rather than later on when you have multiple pages. Just when you have this first 2 set, we know that if there's no intersection now, then there most likely won't be later. Okay, and there we go. So now what we need to do finally for these 2 is just, let's this time just cut these layers off. So I'm going to highlight these 2, and because they do intersect, once we can't see that page on the left anymore, so it's here, I'm going to hold Alt or Option and do the close square bracket just to cut those layers there. So from now on we can move forward and only see these 2. So we will need to repeat that cutting process for the next set of pages and all the pages going forward. So do keep in mind that if you do change the timings of when you want the page turns, you may need to also have them cut off at different times as well. It's not just a case of moving the keyframes, you do need to make sure that they're cut off at the correct times. So now let's highlight our page 2 and 3, our second set. Duplicate, drag these to the bottom. Don't forget to change the color. Let's go for blue this time. Highlight our first layer, hold Alt or Option, and we want page 4. So let's Alt replace page 4. And then Alt replace this one with page 5. Let's highlight the 2 layers and press U for our keyframes. And we're going to go to the first keyframe of the layer above. So the layer above the ones we've just duplicated, you can see they are intersecting. But if I was just to move this layer along slightly so the page turn isn't happening at the same time, they are still intersecting. But if we were to go forwards 1 frame, where these 2 purple pages start to turn, you'll see that you can't see the pages below it anymore. So this is where we want these 2 layers to start. So find this keyframe, 1 frame forward, and that's where we want these 2 pages to start. But again, these keyframes can be moved anywhere we want. I'm going to move them to roughly here, just so the page turns start happening more frequently as we go through the timeline. And we did know these were going to intersect, so now we need to highlight our 2 purple purple layers, and find where it is no longer visible from the left, which is here. Hold Alt or Option and close square bracket just to cut those layers off. And now we can play this through and they won't intersect during the closure of the pages. And this is the process we're going to be repeating for the other pages. So I'm just going to do another 2 here. Highlight these 2, duplicate, drag them beneath, not forgetting to change the color. Let's go with cyan, and then select our first of our new pages and then Alt replace with page 6. And then page 5 needs to be page 7. And then let's press U on all of these final 4 layers just so we can see that first keyframe. Go forwards 1 keyframe, and then that's where we want our new layers to start. So now we can hide those. And I'm going to keep the timing the same. I know straight away it's going to intersect, so I'm going to go straight to the end and cut these layers off, and it's there. So Alt and square bracket, close square bracket, sorry. And then let's just quickly add the final 2 pages, and I'm just going to do this as quick as possible just to hit home how quick and simple it can be once you know what you're doing. So I'm just going to alt replace with our final 2 pages. The break my own rule will not change the colour, so let's just go with an orange. Let's make it so it closes quite quick. So there you go. Once you do know what you're doing and you know the process, it can be much quicker, a lot easier. Now, if I get out my magic wand, I can add a camera, some lights and a floor to catch the shadows, and the scene can really come to life.